up, man? How you feeling today?
Feeling really great. More than great. Feeling awesome. So far, it's been a great start to this day.
That's awesome, man. We all create our own weather every day, right? Man, how you feeling today?
I love that. I had a friend that used to end meetings by asking, "How's your weather?" And that was a good reminder about that question. I love the fact that we are in charge of making our own weather.
So what's your buddy's name? Can you say that?
Oh yeah, his name's Drew Vincent. We worked on this thing called the Stay-at-Home Gala. Like when COVID hit, he had this like crazy idea about let's find ways to bring everybody still together and do something. And so in like 12 days, we pulled together this online event. We hosted it over Zoom. We're like, we don't know what's going to happen. We ended up raising like $50,000 for local Kelowna charity group here. And it was just us. Drew pulled together this great team, but every day we met to like making sure we were making the right progress. And he always ended it by, checking on your weather and be like, some people are like, oh, it's kind of stormy and really like feels like we're in the eye of the hurricane. And other times it'd be like, oh, it's beautiful and sunny. We're feeling it. And it was just a great way to pull everybody together. It was a really powerful question and something different that you don't typically hear when you're wrapping up, a team meeting, especially when you're under some crazy self-imposed due dates.
Yeah, I heard Ben Horowitz talk once about the idea of peacetime and wartime.
Yeah.
And peacetime's lots of consensus, 25% learning time, just everything's great. You're usually maybe a market leader, you're happy with where you are or wherever the case is. And then the wartime is, you've got one arrow and it's got to hit that target, right? And there's definitely less consensus and more idea of criticality and who needs to be involved in decisions. And there's a less learning time for sure. And there's probably a little bit more overtime on the other end as well. That's like we're getting hacked, our stocks dropping in price, those kinds of. So it's interesting how in a life as well as in organizations, we shift from both peacetime and wartime.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think
go ahead.
that's very interesting. I haven't heard it described like that, but yeah, it's totally true. Like you got to be able to embrace them both, right? So know when to slip into each of them.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when you can have tools that allow you to be aware of where you are. And I'll bring up the screen share of what we were just talking about because you had some really cool stuff on how to approach that. And I think we have a screen share up of what you were talking about. So Gene is someone who I just really enjoyed what they were talking about. I also enjoyed our conversation. There was a lot of passion and purpose in it. I just felt as though we should have a conversation. And I'm always curious to hear about why someone does what they do, framed as a beautiful question that they live their life as an attempt to better understand that might become their field of research. And, he comes from, turns out, some fields, right, as well as British Columbia with his mom and dad. And he's really excited about people being able to, as we have right here, see the possibilities. And that's a really cool thing, Gene. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you do what you do?
Right. So, well, I'm a coach and I help people, I've kind of realized where my coaching's coming down to is helping people, actually serving people to be able to see the possibilities in their life again, right? When we're young, we are filled with possibilities and things are endless. We have this creative curiosity that's constantly flowing. But over time, life has this way of just kind of like, sadly beating that out of us in some instances. And it over time, I found in myself that I kept putting the blinders on and losing track of all that curiosity and that creativity. And now in my more advanced age, I over the last decade to 5-6 years, been a lot of work on refinding that again. Going, okay, there's what happens when something bad happens. What can you take from that? And you could either take that and crumble, or you could go, okay, I've got some new pieces. What was happening before obviously didn't lead to a situation I'm too stoked about. am I going to keep doing the same thing and expect it to change? Or can I look at the possibilities of that and bring more out of it? Is this an opportunity for me to grow? At the start of our conversation, Brent, you answered that you're grateful and challenged, and you smiled about it, right? I want more people to feel that exact same way, is to find the gratitude in their life to the challenges and being able to rise up to them and find out what they're really trying to bring out. Is, I think that there's a strong piece that when we are feeling challenged, we kind of get this like sense of like these weird feelings. And if we don't sit with them enough, we think that they're a bad indicator. And they're really not. There may be just a system that's going on saying, hey, this could be something good, or this is unknown, and that's okay too.
Wow, that's pretty wild. So would you relate this cycle to what you're working on? The idea of authenticity and perspective, taking that into how you process bad things and setting up, like you talked about, small pieces in a process that you can improve on to get to your goals. Is that a good way of describing it, Gene?
I think so. That's actually, I'm going to make sure that I get a screenshot of that diagram afterwards. You put it really well together. When
Oh
I talk
yeah.
about, in your questionnaire, you ask, what's one of the driving questions that I have? It's like, well, what's my day going to be if I don't put my feet on the ground? And for me, that's a bit of a metaphor for stepping into, like, you're in your warm, take it for, that you're in your warm, comfortable bed. Your alarm goes off at 5 in the morning, and you're like, oh, I should go and work out. Snooze, 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 snooze. Well, if I don't do that, I know what my day is going to shape up to be. I've already missed a commitment to myself, and it starts kind of this chain reaction of what other commitments might I not keep to myself. So I try to find the easiest way to remove all the components of willpower and motivation by looking for the smallest piece. So for me, nothing can happen in that case, in my morning routine, if I don't put my feet on the ground. And I know as soon as I put my feet on the ground, it's now a routine. So I'm not thinking about it. Well, now my next steps is like, go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, get my day started. Once that's happened, well, now I'm moving down the stairs. I've got my workout clothes on, and I'm doing like either a hike or doing some work for, free body weight movement, yoga, something. I'm moving in the morning. And once that happens, I know within 5 minutes of doing it, yeah, it sucks to start, but damn, does it ever feel good when you end, right? So that's that whole like, what am I going to do? Even though it's not the most fun thing to start, but by the time I'm done it, I'm going to feel like this great reward.
Wow, that's really easy to map because I resonate with it. And you're just making this too easy for me, Gene. So usually it's difficult for me off the bat to see the pieces in between things. And, I'll sort of stop the share here because, you know, the feedback that you talked about when you talked about, how are you going to pull it off sort of comes from a story about a challenge called 75 Hard. And this isn't something I was aware of. So if you sort of want to share that origin story, that'd be great.
Sure. So last year, I got introduced to this program called 75 Hard. So I'll even take this a step back. So when COVID hit, I'm part of a group called JCI, and it's a worldwide organization for young active adults that are between 18 to 40. When I say active, I mean like in their community, in their leadership roles, and wanting to actually grow and be better. Like part of our motto is #be better. So when COVID hit, I created this group to thinking, oh, maybe like some of my local chapters and some in the area, like who wants to stay active? Be like, we have to stay more or less indoors and away from each other. We're a very social group. So how are we going to be able to start moving and making sure people's well-being is being taken care of? Started this Facebook group, all of a sudden like ballooned into like 800 people. So these are JCs all over the world. And one of them from BC shared that she was doing this program called 75 Hard. So this is an idea that came from a gentleman named Andy Frisella. So love him or hate him, he's a powerhouse of a guy that came up with 75 Hard. And what it is two workouts, so two 45-minute workouts each day. You have to have them spaced apart, and one has to be outside regardless of the conditions. Then it's like drink 4 liters of water, so we Canadian sized that. Read 10 pages of a nonfiction book every day. Take a selfie, a progress selfie, and that's it. And you just lather, rinse, repeat that. Oh yeah, and actually that's there's no alcohol in it. And then you pick your own food plan. So whatever, if you want to do keto or if you're doing intermittent fasting like I did, you pick that and you stick with it for 75 days. And if you miss any one of those things, you start back at day one. So on the surface, this looks like a physical conditioning thing, but what it really is a mental toughness challenge. It's like, can you actually focus on yourself for 75 days in a row and reap some great rewards for it? So this was something I decided I'd been mulling with and decided to take it on after the May long weekend. Said, you know what, enough's enough. I want to try this. This thing keeps calling to me. So me and my wife did it, and it was an incredible journey. Like there were some days that was so brutal, but it's just like, I'm not quitting. I'm going to get to my 75 days in my first try. And I did. And it was a lot of, I look back as like, it was a lot of fun. During it, you realize how much capacity you really have. And all the excuses kind of like melt away for, well, A, not keeping active enough or eating right or getting enough water in, when all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm tracking this stuff. And you're starting to see the results in your body and starting to feel a lot less cloudy, like mentally. Like it's when you're going like that, it was, I felt the most creative that I probably felt in years doing that. And that was like taking on a ton at that time.
So more creative, more healthy. I'm taking notes here at the same time. And then your benefit as something maybe you didn't even realize going into that was now what you're doing with your business and your life. And you've really just brought that all into parallel with the willpower and motivation and small things and the way that you empower people. Would you say that's fair to say?
Oh, 100%. Like prior to that, like I didn't even see myself going down the coaching path when I started 75 Hard or before that. I always thought in my mind, I'm like, oh, you know what? That'd be great when I'm older, like when I'm 50, got more experience. Maybe I can start to do that. And then by the time summertime rolled around, there was just this weird shift. And I was open to receiving, uh, feedback in the form of compliments. Like that was a huge like game changer for how I moved forward. And just seeing that what this really taught me was the power of commitment to myself, and what that power of keeping a commitment to myself and then figuring out the ways to, again, to break it down. So it was in these little bite-sized pieces that I could do these little wins every single day. And all of a sudden that starts to stack up. And it's like, in your world of finance, that compounds really quickly, being able to find out what you can do when you're not. It was almost, even though there was a lot going on, it was almost like that peacetime. I was learning how to make myself stronger so that when wartime would show up, I knew what tools I had at my disposal and how hard and how far I could truly push myself.
Yeah, when things get tough, the tough get going, or all sorts of things like that. I've heard these phrases, and yeah, it really starts in the idea of proactive versus reactive, and the idea of what can I do today if this feels right, of maybe just yelling at one less person,
Oh, totally. Right.
whatever the thing is.
And I found a lot of my challenges dropped away. Right. And I've been a big proponent of constant practice. Like You look at professional athletes, they still practice before the big game. They had to do a lot of practice to be able to be at the top of their game, and a lot of training. And that doesn't happen under game time conditions. You want to be ready for when your game time shows up. And in life, you truly, sometimes you just never know when the big game's going to be dropped on your lap. So being prepared for that just allows you to know what you can do, right? There's no amount of planning that's going to get you there. I think it was Mike Tyson that had the quote of, you can plan all day until life punches you in the face, right? Is you never know when you're going to get that hit, but you could be prepared for it. And I see planning and preparedness as two different things, right? Preparedness is like giving yourself those little, I call them micro pushes, like just a little push outside of your comfort zone into little things. It could be coming on somebody's podcast is like a little micro push. Or if you're doing exercise, maybe like, oh man, here's 10. You're like, I'm going to do 12. I'm going to do 12 push-ups today instead. And it's just a little bit, right? You don't need to stretch super far to this point of failure, but you can still push yourself into this realm of being uncomfortable and learning to enjoy it, learning to embrace it, and just kind of like sit in the chaos that it is, because it can be a lot of fun if you learn how to sit in it and learn that it doesn't burn you and that it's okay. And like actually some real cool rewards are going to happen when you get outside of that comfort zone. So it's like, how can you help people find different little spots that they can do a micro push on a daily basis?
And how have you been able to help people in that regard? In the sense of what are what are some of your early learning lessons? And now, I have a great view, and I feel as though most people do, of the process. What are some of your early learning lessons on how you were able to help people in that regard? Because before the recording, you said something to me. You said, I have to live my own process in
Yeah,
order to offer that to someone else. So some of your early lessons?
sure. Well, yeah, I'm a big fan of, if I'm going to share my Kool-Aid, I'm going to make sure I drink it first and that it's tasty. So how I lived that, like when you ask that question, what comes up is like thinking back to when I ran teams at digital agencies. And our focus was always on how could we be 1% better, right? So if we're taking that at scale, running, teams of 5, departments of 20, how do you start to get everybody focused away from how much hiding mistakes is a big problem. So how do we start to bring mistakes into the limelight and embrace them? Well, you got to start talking about them. So how can we be 1% better was a question I would ask almost daily, to the point of probably driving some of my team bonkers. But we got into this rhythm of starting to go, okay, what is that one thing that we did this week? And what is this one thing we did every 2 weeks sprints to make our team run a little bit better, make our communication just a little bit better? And in the course of a quarter to a year, it was amazing the amount of improvements that can happen when you focus on just that 1% or even just half a percent. So we'd always find so many people would be looking at, oh, I want like a 10% improvement. Be like, oh, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. And it's not going to be sustainable. So how can we build something that's really sustainable? So this idea of like, how can I be 1% better started, trickling into my head. And then, that underlines my feet on my ground question, but like, how can I be 1% better? So like for myself, if I'm out on my bike, right now it's snowing here in British Columbia, so there's no biking. But like it started to show up when I was out doing my morning workouts. It's just like, oh, like I could feel my body getting tired, and I'd be like, well, how would when I feel tired, I'm going to push as hard as I can to the next thing that I can see, right? So it's a light post. So instead of like giving into that tiredness, I'd stand up on the pedals and go as hard as I could to that light post, just knowing I was 1% better in that moment than I gave myself, permission to be initially, right? When I felt that fatigue or felt like, oh, just give yourself a little break. Be like, no, this is a moment to push when nobody's looking, when there's nothing super dear on the line. It's that point to practice that feeling about embracing it.
Yeah, that's actually great. Is maybe you could help people with some training around like, there's actually no benefit, just do it. In the
Yeah.
sense, like, nobody's watching. In fact, maybe somebody's starting a company and nobody, you have no employees, right? You have nothing. You bought the LLC. I guess there's some money that you might be out a little bit on, and you can just let it all slip away. I'd recommend closing the LLC properly, or you will pay late fees. I have been there. But other than that, you're just like you don't really have to do it, right? And you can generally get a job, or most people can if they're motivated, they can generally get a job. I know we're in trying times where that's actually being questioned a little bit in a lot of regards. However, there's a lot of value you can go out and create, right?
Oh,
And so, how did you? So can you talk a little bit about internalizing that motivation? How some people feed off of environments and some people internalize that and become the environment. How would you, have you found some baselines across the two types of people?
ooh, that's a really interesting question. Well, I think there's like where I would see it is there's people that when you view them, you're like, oh my lord, how do they just self motivate? How do they regulate? And how do they move themselves into those spaces? So I think you've got these people that show up as like they're self starters, we'll call them that. Then you've got other people that need motivation or support to get there. And the reality is they just haven't built up that that comfortability with being uncomfortable yet, right? Of like, well, what if somebody sees? What if I get criticized?
Yeah.
Most of that most of those things are all like tied right back into fear, which is then tied back into like typically some childhood memories, childhood like modeling that you had. Now
Yeah.
there's not
What if they
parent.
think it's stupid, Gene? Or people don't believe in you? And I'll tell you right now, and as you well know, people just don't believe in it. They say, and that's actually a great one. Have you ever heard of the mom test?
Telling your mom and seeing how she reacts.
So most moms love moms, right? They're gonna say, "That's great, sweetie. Go out and try it." Right? And something along those lines. I know there's some moms out there that will not, but generally this is seen as a very supportive person in that regard as far as encouragement. And you want to go outside of your family and ask people what they think about it, right? Because you always get people in those spaces who will have difficulty telling you what you really feel. So how do you feel about accountability? You talked about it. Everybody's got an alarm clock, right? Let's say the two examples, two different people, they wake up with an alarm clock. Um, they have basic needs, right? So you focus a lot on health.
Yeah,
And then how does accountability feel?
I think that's different for everybody, right? Like,
Okay.
the one thing that you talked about is like that fear of like being viewed as being stupid or silly or whatever, right? Is it comes down to perspective. And again, like accountability comes down to a point of who's keeping you accountable, right? Like we all have, at some point we were all accountable to our parents. Then we're going to be accountable to like, romantic relationships. Some of us are parents, so we are accountable to our kids. We have work. So if we're an employee or an entrepreneur, we're still accountable to all these different people. So it almost comes down to start doing a little bit of an audit around what accountabilities or promises do you have that you have like are your baseline before you even get too carried away with it, and finding out which ones actually do you need to be there for. Like as a parent, you got to be there. That's not a choice. You already made that choice, so you have to be accountable. So you have to be prepared, and you have to have the energy there. So what on the other side of it, work, hobbies, what are those things that are going to be starting to fill up your tank a little bit to make you have that energy and that excitement for your life? Because I think what I see is when you don't have that, it's really hard to be accountable. It's really hard to even move to do anything. You're just kind of going through the motions a little bit. So I think accountability comes down to, you know, understanding who it is, but at the there's, I should rephrase that. There's always going to be external people with expectations on you. How are you going to help hold yourself accountable? Some of us can do it on our own, and some of us are going to need a friend. Be like, Brant, can you hold me accountable for this? And this is what that's going to look like if I don't. And giving you, you need to almost have that explicit permission given to an external source so that you can take their feedback and actually internalize that, and you do something with it. As I'm working through that, like, did that make sense?
Yeah, it's really interesting how when you talk about the end of that there really stood out about how you give someone else the ability to um, change the agreement or some other overarching agreement if this doesn't come through. This could be a job, this could be in a relationship that's trying to improve or recover or whatever the case is. This could be achieving a specific goal that you've been trying to achieve for a while and it's having impacts on other parts of your life or basically anything like that. And so, yeah, accountability is an interesting thing. I hadn't heard it put that way before. It's very interesting on giving someone else, let's call it, well, what would you call it? What is that thing that you're giving them?
I guess you're giving them permission, but like you're basically asking a trusted source to be an accountability partner, right? And sometimes those are going to be assigned to you through like a boss, but there's other parts of your life that you can reach out and add that into your repertoire, right? It's building up your own support network, because humans are social animals, and we need it in some shape or form.
Yeah, dude, I love your brain, right? You just nailed it on the social side. So we have your, physical needs, right? We have the idea that we've talked about of, let's call it contracts almost, or accountability with oneself and then possible assistance with that. And those really they ride on physical and social, it seems like. And those are our hard skills and our soft skills and other things like that. Do you work with skill improvements as well, or how would you describe your process if someone were to get in touch with you or something like that? Phil, hit me like I'm five.
Well, when I'm working with somebody, like typically I work with a lot of people that are graduating from the solopreneur world, and like and now all of a sudden realize they've got people that they have to be responsible for, and all the way up to like much larger organizations with leaders. But typically, people, if you're somebody that are responsible for other people, then those are the groups that I start to work with, right? So when we talk about skill upgrading, it's self-awareness is at the core of it all. Like that is the ultimate skill that's going to unlock everything else. Can you look in the mirror and not be critical, but be honest with yourself? And that's really hard for a lot of people. Like you look at it and you can already start to hear your own stories that come out. Sometimes those voices are not yours. They're from an external source, just like we were talking before. But what if I look silly? What if somebody calls me stupid? What if? Like, well, there's always going to be negative what ifs. But like, how about you own your part of it? Can you take 100% responsibility for your mood and your actions? No? Well, let's work to get you there. Because if you can do that one thing, the rest is going to unlock for you. Because then you're going to be able to not blame somebody else or something else for, I feel angry. Be like, good, feel angry. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with any of our emotions. Our emotions are a signal system that something's either like, do more of this or stop doing this. That is all they're there to really tell us to do. It's part of our body intelligence, right? So that, for me, like when we talk about skill upgrade, is like, how do we start to build a trust with clients to be able to go, okay, be my reflection. What are you seeing? And then being okay with hearing the questions that come back. As a coach, like it's not so much my role to like give you specific action items, but it's to help you unlock a new window or open a new doorway to maybe an area of your life that you've been purposefully avoiding. And that might not even be at the conscious level, but that if there's pain in your life and you're not okay with it, you're avoiding something. And if we can get in there, unlock it, and start to figure out what that truly is, you can start to be free from it, or you at least can start to integrate it and be, instead of it being a big shadow monster, you're going to put a big light on it. Go, oh, it's cute. It's just a teddy bear. It wasn't a monster after all.
Wow. Dude, that's really amazing when you talk about, how would you put it? You don't need to run from the bear. Sometimes you just need to turn around and give it a hug and let your light sort of diffuse into it. That being you being able to say, I'm enough. I love myself. I'm fantastic. I can be that for people, even if that takes, you know, one night on the floor. It was enough for me, and I just, you know, curled up in my wife's arms and said, I'm not going to be that kind of man,
Yeah.
right? And just cried my eyes out. And yeah, I haven't felt like that. You just sort of unleash, and you keep surrounding yourself with people that help you find yourself. So I just love what you're doing out there, man. And how can we understand some of the things that really keep you going, Gene? What are
Oh,
some of the things that keep you going?
like I drank the JCI Kool-Aid a long time ago. So like being better is just like ingrained in me, right? So I'm always looking for ways of improving upon it at that 1% increment, right? Like part of Brent, you're going to be on my live cast show here in the future, and one of the things is that I'd always wanted to do a podcast and been like, oh, it'd be great to do this. And so I just started streaming it off of Zoom, and then I went, okay, how can I be 1% better each show? And it's just like those little increments have now added up to like a really fun thing that I look forward to. Like it's my practice, right? So I get to do those kind of stuff on a regular basis. It was like, just, when you're thinking about being better, how can you break that down to even being more kinder and compassionate? It's like, make it about practice. Practice sometimes sucks, but practice is safe, right? Practice allows you to grow, and that for me is so big in my life. Is like, where do I get a chance to grow? How can I be a better father? How can I be a better husband? And a lot of this journey over the last couple of years has led to me being a better husband, to being a better father, because I'm being a better Gene.
Mm.
And that is, I don't know, that excites me every day. Is like, do I get to be a better me? Some days I'm better at it than others, but I'm constantly at least making a little bit of progress. Even if it's like 0.01% progress, it's still progress. And it adds up over time to some big, incredible wins.
Yeah, shoot for the moon. One step is just fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's so cool that, like you, we're so much alike in the regard of you could frame it like being a better husband or a better wife or whatever the case is, a partner, person, whatever the case is. It's close to my home, right? Because I have a wife, and I'm always trying to improve that relationship, because that's how I go out and create a better organization and work with nonprofits or whatever the case is when I'm working with somebody else's landscape of personal as well as business interests or other things like that. So yeah, it's really cool. One step closer to the moon is just fine, right? Keep the vision big, and you'll cover a lot of things in your wake. How's that?
Oh, I love that. It's my coach was asking me the other week around, how do I feel about what I'm doing? And I was like, you know what? I'm right in this point, compared to my future, I'm the worst coach I'll ever be. But compared to where I was a year ago, I'm the best coach that I was, right? Because I'm constantly moving that needle in not an abusive way, not in like, oh, there's no goal in sight. It's just, how do I ask better questions? How do I help people unlock real cool insights? And that just keeps it moving. That's how I know that today I'm doing the best that I know of today. But tomorrow I'll be just a little bit better for it all.
Dude, that's fantastic. So, Gene, this has been an amazing interview as far as just getting another power up. Like, to be honest, doing this session, I know I'm going to go have a great day, right? Right off the bat, I've, had a lot of fun, and I know that people, have had a lot of fun watching some of the things we've produced here. And thank you for bringing just another flavor to that in your own individual approach that we got some chance to map and people saw in the live stream, and I'll get that over to you as far as a PDF and just a view of our notes here today. And that I think is a great learning tool. And for anybody out there that's watching the stream, I'd love your feedback on, or more appropriately, how can we make this more effective for you to learn through? And to be honest, I'd love to encourage anybody here to reach out to Gene on LinkedIn at Peeled Back, and that's PEALED /back or hyphen back or whatever the dash is, right? At Peeled Back, and Peeled Back on Facebook, and Gene Bernier on LinkedIn.
Yes,
So
would love to connect. One of my goals this year is just to have one quality conversation every week, and I've been smashing it out of the park, and this is just adds to it. So thank you so much for having me on your show today, Brent. It's been a lot of fun, and as always, like time just flies by.
Well, perfect. And thank you everyone for joining Finding Beautiful Questions. Gene, I've really enjoyed this. And yes, we've made it. It was, some people consider a gauntlet, but this was quite comfortable today, and it was a lot of fun. So thank you again.
All right, you're welcome, and we'll see you in a few weeks.